Here is a question most business leaders are not ready to answer honestly. Is your procurement process is fair enough? Not intended to be fair. Actually, verifiably, provably fair? Because for decades, subcontracting and vendor selection have been governed by one invisible force, more than any written policy. Who you know, what golf course you were on, whose call you took before the bid closed. On April 30th, 2026, the Korea Land and Housing Corporation decided that was no longer acceptable, and the system they built to replace it has implications that go far beyond procurement. My name is Mayor. This channel is where I break down the structural shifts in AI that every business leaders, founder, and knowledge worker needs to understand before those shifts make the decision for them. This is part 3, the final video of a series I have been building called AI Infrastructure 2026. Part 1 covered the US AI Task Force and the coming compliance requirements for businesses. Part 2 covered Commure's integrated AI platform and the industrial blueprint. Both are linked in the description. Go watch them if you haven't. Now let's dive into the topic. On April 30th, 2026, the Korea Land and Housing Corporation initiated an AI-based fair subcontracting management system with a formal budget of 215 million Korean won, that is roughly 155,000 US dollars, a targeted, deliberate investment with a specific mandate: remove human bias from a multi-billion-dollar subcontracting pipeline. KLHC oversees public housing and land development in South Korea, one of the most politically sensitive, high-value procurement environments in the country. For decades, the subcontracting process in this space has been influenced by informal relationships, opaque evaluation criteria, and the kind of pattern-based favoritism that is nearly impossible to prove but widely understood to exist. What KLHC is building changes that architecture entirely. They are implementing what is formally called an Information Strategy Master Plan, or ISMP. In plain terms, they are writing the rulebook for how procurement decisions should be made, and then handing that rulebook to an AI to execute with perfect consistency at scale. The AI does 4 things in this system. It analyzes incoming bids against defined criteria. It tracks each vendor's historical performance record. It flags statistical anomalies in bid patterns. For example, if the same vendor keeps winning at suspiciously precise margins, then it logs every decision with full traceability, like who submitted what criteria applied, what score was generated, and why. The result is a process where every single procurement decision can be explained, defended, and if necessary, challenged on the basis of documented logic rather than someone's word against someone else's. That is what agentic governance looks like in practice, and it is better at fairness than most human processes. Here is what the business case for agentic governance actually looks like in numbers. Process speed. Procurement cycles that used to require 3 to 4 weeks of human review to collecting bids, scoring them, running internal approvals, documenting decisions will now collapse to 3 to 5 days with a well-built agentic system. Not because corners are cut, but because the bottleneck of human availability is removed from the critical path. Audit readiness. Audit preparation that traditionally required a team of 3 to 4 people working for 2 weeks produces a complete report. Now that can be generated in 2 minutes. Every decision logged, every criterion documented, every anomaly flagged and resolved. That is not marginal efficiency, that is a structural transformation of compliance cost. Legal risk reduction. Every procurement decision a human makes carries the risk of perceived bias, even if the decision was correct. Every decision the AI makes can be replayed, explained, and defended in a courtroom. In a regulatory environment where the first question after any complaint is, "Show me the decision log," that traceability is not a feature. It is a legal shield. Here is how to think about building an agentic governance layer in your own organization. I am going to walk through a practical 3-phase approach. Phase 1. Encode the rulebook. Before you deploy any AI, you need to do something harder than technology. You need to explicitly write down how decisions should be made, not how they are made today, often informally, often inconsistently. How they should be made based on the actual criteria that matter. For a procurement system, this means defining what criteria qualify a vendor, how historical performance is weighted, what bid patterns trigger a review flag, and what human escalation looks like when the AI encounters an edge case. This phase takes time. It is also the most valuable work your team will do because it forces clarity that the organization probably never had. Phase 2. Deploy the agent against the rulebook. Once the rulebook is formalized, you configure an AI agent to execute it. In practice, this means feeding your decision criteria into a structured prompt layer, connecting it to your bid or request data, and building the logging infrastructure that captures every decision point. The agent does not guess, it does not improvise, it follows the rules you wrote and documents every step it takes. Phase 3. Build the escalation layer. No agentic system should operate without a human escalation layer, especially at first. When the AI encounters a bid, it cannot score cleanly because of missing data, conflicting signals, a new vendor type not covered in the rulebook. It flags the case, packages all relevant context, and routes it to a human reviewer. The reviewer's decision and the reason for it gets logged and fed back into the system to improve future handling. Over time, the escalation rate drops as the rulebook matures. I want to be direct here because I think most coverage of this topic softens what is actually happening. If your job title includes words like manages, reviews, approves, or coordinates, and your core work product is moving information from one place to another rather than applying judgment to it, the KLHC model is a direct structural challenge to your current role definition, not in the dramatic science fiction sense, in the very practical organizational design sense. Why would a company maintain 3 procurement officers to do what a well-architected agentic system does in real time, with better consistency, lower error rates, and a complete audit trail? Here is the answer, and this is the part where most analysis gets wrong. Those 3 procurement officers become absolutely indispensable from the moment they transition from executing the process to designing the system that executes the process. The person who knows why a rule exists, what edge cases break it, how to revise it when the regulatory environment shifts, that person is the system architect. System architects are not being replaced. They are being promoted into the most strategically critical roles in the organization. The transition is not automatic. It requires deliberate skill development, a learning to encode domain expertise into formal logic, to think in systems rather than tasks, to design for consistency at scale rather than for individual judgment calls. But the path is clear and it is open right now. KLHC's deployment is a proof of concept for something much larger than subcontracting. The pattern will be the same: formalize the rulebook, deploy the agent, build the escalation layer, refine over time. The organizations that develop the internal competency to do this by starting with one process and getting it right and then expanding will have a replicable methodology that compounds across every function of the business. KLHC is not a story about procurement technology. It is the proof that agentic AI can govern processes more fairly and more consistently than human bureaucracies, but just when the rules are designed correctly. Here is the question I want you to answer in the comments. What is the one process in your organization that would benefit most from being governed by explicit AI executable rules rather than informal human judgment? This is the final video in a 3-part series on AI Infrastructure 2026. If you missed part 1 on the US AI Task Force or part 2 on KOMIR's Integrated AI Platform Blueprint, both are linked in the description and on screen now. Together they tell one complete story about where AI is going and what you need to build to stay in front of your industry. If this series gave you frameworks you will actually use in your business, please do subscribe. Each week I come up with new AI tools for your venture. Thank you for watching and we'll see you in the next one.